Welcome to Talks with Tracy, with certified hypnotherapist, life coach, and licensed mental health professional, Tracy Claremont. Tracy will share her healing journey and explore the many meaningful alternative healing methods in our world today that will support you in doing your own deepest emotional healing. So please welcome the host of Talks with Tracy, Tracy Claremont. Let the suffering end and the healing begin.
Hello and welcome to Talks with Tracy. I am your host, Tracy Claremont, coming to you live on the Bold Brave Television Network. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm always so happy and so very thankful for everybody who listens and views this podcast. So I'm sending you love your way. And also thank you to Bold Brave Television Network for having me. So I do a lot of talking about doing that deep dive into your emotional experience for the purpose of true emotional healing on this show. And we talk a lot about different modalities that often are considered alternative healing methods. Of course, now in my world, to me, those are primary healing methods that I know that I use and in my opinion are the most effective means of healing because they really get to the root causes and they help put meaning and purpose to your life experience and really put an end to that emotional suffering. So now receiving guidance on this journey is super important and super helpful. I've received guidance in several different ways myself, like I've received guidance from psychic mediums, from through hand reading, through Reiki, through hypnosis, through all sorts of different methods and modalities. But one of the areas that I have relatively little experience in is the area of astrology. Now, you would think, given my entire way of thinking about my life and being in this lifetime, my soul consciousness and my belief in following the flow of life and following those things that unfold and really being mindful of what the universe presents with all of that, you would think that I would be somebody who would know all sorts of stuff about astrology and check my horoscope faithfully and whatnot. But really, I have very little experience in that. And I've always been interested in it, but I've never taken the time to really experience that and learn about it until recently. So, one day I was getting my hair done by my beautiful hairdresser, Jay McDonald, and she said, "Hey, you should have Heather Rowan Robbins on your show." And I was like, "Oh, who is that? Tell me about that." And she told me that Heather Rowan Robbins is an amazing astrologer who has also created an astrology deck called the Star Code Astro Oracle deck. And she was telling me that this amazing woman lives right here in the same little town here in Montana as me, which was shocking. I mean, we have like a little over 2,000 people in the town that I live in. So I went searching and I found her. I'm so excited. Turns out she's just like right up the road from my office. So anyway, it turns out that Heather Rowan Robbins is an incredibly gifted, choice-based astrologer. She is a spiritual counselor, which I think might be the same as an intuitive counselor. We'll have to ask her about that. She is a ceremonialist and an author. Again, she created the Star Codes Astro Oracle deck, and she's written several books on astrology and on palmistry. And I believe palmistry is the same as hand reading. So she's even written a couple children's books. She is truly spectacular. So now I had the honor and privilege of having my very first astrology reading done by her a couple weeks ago. And it was just a great experience, such an incredible experience. And even though this is my whole worldview now in the world that I live in, I am still always shocked and amazed when I can go to somebody for a reading and somebody who knows virtually nothing about me and suddenly have them like explaining my life experience and mapping it out according to the universe and even though I'm such a believer, I'm still always just so amazed by that whole process. And that was my experience with Heather a couple weeks ago. So I strongly recommend that you get a reading by her. It's super, super amazing. And it was one more thing to help me um, kind of map out where I'm going in my lifetime, and the purpose put more meaning to my experience. So I could do a whole show on that reading, and I'm pretty sure I will in the future. But today I am so happy to say that I actually have Heather Rowan Robbins here with me to visit. Now she's agreed to do 2 shows with me, and today we're going to talk about her own life experience. She's going to share some of her experience from the perspective of challenges and suffering and healing. And I really appreciate her willingness to share that. And then in a couple weeks, Heather will be back to talk about how she guides people through astrology and spiritual counseling and things like that in their own journeys, and how she is helpful in that way. So I am so excited to have Heather here today. Please join me in welcoming the amazing and beautiful Heather Rowan Robbins.
Hello.
Good
What a
morning.
wonderful
Hi.
introduction. Thank you.
Oh, I am just so amazed by you, and I'm so happy to know you. Like I said, it was kind of shocking to know that you were like just up the road from
Just up
me
the
this whole
road.
time.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
We moved here 8 years ago and just love it. We really,
Oh, okay.
those mountains there's nothing like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I absolutely agree. I myself am a lifer. I've been here
Yeah.
my entire life. And I agree, there's no more beautiful place, especially in the springtime. Oh, I love the springtime.
Love it.
And yeah, so, when I did that reading with you, it really helped me again to put more purpose and meaning, and it encouraged me. The roadmap, you laid out for me was really encouraging, and it helped me to, like, sometimes I have those moments where I'm like, I don't really know where things are going. I trust and I keep going, but I'm not really sure. And it's so nice to have kind of a trajectory out there for, this is what's happening and this is unfolding. And now I would imagine you are no different from everybody else in the world in regard to you here living this lifetime with, purpose and meaning, and learning your lessons. And those lessons are not always easy to learn, but
No, they're not.
I
None
know
of ours.
you've agreed. No.
Hmm.
And even when you have such gifts like you have with your intuitiveness and your your great knowledge of the universe, you are still here having a human experience.
Very much. One step at a
Absolutely.
time.
Yes, and you have your
Yeah.
struggles, and I know that you've agreed to share some of those with us. So, I mean, our experiences start in our childhood, so maybe we could just kind of jump into your own life experience and start in
Okay.
childhood. Does that feel comfortable for you?
Absolutely. Yep.
Oh,
And I would
good.
say that, I think every one of us has intuition and that we use it on what we
Hmm.
study. I think my brother was a highly intuitive car mechanic, and he could tell by the sound, because that's the one thing he did, was he worked on cars, and he could tell by the
Hmm.
sound coming around the corner what was wrong with that car. And it was a combination of what he'd studied and his intuition. I think every one of us has that place. I think
Oh,
Jay, the hairdresser, has a very intuitive approach to hair, and I love her for it. That when you get good at something, it allows your intuition to flow into that. So I'd say I've studied astrology and all these other skills. I would say also that I'm an intuitive, but I'm not the most amazing intuitive. The most amazing intuitives I know can't do this work because they get overwhelmed. And you have
oh,
to, like, learning to protect yourself and guard yourself and use it is, they need to do for safety. So if they do
mm,
that, then they can do more intuitive work. But I think that's where it
oh,
comes.
okay.
And I think, you mentioned everybody's childhood does strange things. And and my parents were older when they had me. I found out very recently that a lot of the
Mm,
mysteries, and again, we can't always read ourselves, were because
mm-hmm.
there was fertility issues, and in their late 30s, they had donor conceived they had a sperm donor back in 1955. So
Oh,
that was
wow.
very rare back then. And they found someone, I gather, who looks just like my dad because you can see the lineage. But it was, there was always this sense of there were things that I didn't know in the corner. Now, my
Hmm.
mother who was, the family joke was my mother's a psychiatric nurse, my dad's an abstract mathematician. Put them together and you get an astrologer, which was pretty funny. But I have his kind of logic and seeing things in patterns, but I didn't inherit his ability with numbers. And my mom, who was a psychiatric nurse, but who had also been through a severe postpartum depression, had lost
Mhm.
years before me, had lost 4 children before I arrived.
Oh,
And
wow.
so there was always this sense of ghosts and stories unspoken. Her mother died in the flu epidemic in at the very end of 1919, and she so the kind of this lineage of people on the other side was very strong
Mm.
in my childhood, even though it wasn't spoken about. And the
Hmm.
scientific framework of the family didn't give us um, a model to work with it. I could still feel it. And that
Mm.
affected me. I was allergic to my own antibodies as a kid. And that's a kind of a strange thing that took them a while to figure out. But it's not apparently that uncommon for donor conceived kids to have some immune issues. And no one knows quite why, but there's theories. But the so I would get a cold, and then I would get allergic to my antibodies responding to that cold, and I would
Hmm.
get croup, and I would stop breathing. And
Oh.
my parents, luckily my mom was a nurse, and they would, with a lot of training in public health back when, they had to do things as nurses, like quick, do something. And so they would carry me into the shower and kind of pound my back while I inhaled steam and try to get me breathing. And this would happen from the time I was, you know, 6 months through, and I had allergy shots when I was around. By the time I was 10, it was under control, but it's still something I keep an eye on. Hypnotherapy has worked best with my immune issues than any other
Mm.
modality as far as kind of retraining my system to respond appropriately, to not attack
Mm.
me, to attack the germ,
Mhm.
to do
Mm.
it, to kind of get organized about that. I really highly recommend that for anybody dealing with autoimmune issues. See, Tracy.
Wonderful.
But one of the experiences that I had that led me to kind of pursue this path in the long run, to always wonder about spirit, is I remember after, in the middle of a very bad attack, I'm watching my parents carry me into the bathroom. Now I'm
Mm.
5 years old at this time, and I am watching them carry me into the bathroom from a position about 20 feet over stairs.
Mm.
And that's the only way you could get the perspective that I was seeing. There was no platform on that side of the stairs. There was no way to see that if you weren't hovering in midair. I
Hmm.
didn't have a GoPro. And it was, so, and then I woke up upside down, having my back thwacked. And I'm going, what
Mm.
happened? And it made it very clear to me, and other people had no idea what I was talking about when I tried to describe that we are not just our bodies, that there's something
Mm.
more in us. Now, I've only had a few other out of body experiences since then. They'd say that one could be classified as a near death experience. It
Mm.
was like on the edge of it. And the other time that I remember a few odd moments when it felt hard to get back into my body when I woke up, but that's another story. But I
Mhm.
remember when I was about 21, a dear friend of mine who I was very worried about, just because she was not in emotionally sound place. Um, I had gone home to visit my parents, but I couldn't sleep. I was up in the middle of the night, and had my hand up, and I was thinking about, should I move something on this wall? I was kind of closing up shop at my parents' house. And all of a sudden, my vision slammed through my hand and against the far wall. And I went, and then I turned around, and I'm sitting there. I'm lying on the bed, and I'm just staring. And I went, holy crap. And I slammed back into my body.
Oh.
And I wrote that down, and I told people, and I go, I don't know what happened that night. Well, my dear friend had been murdered at that moment
Oh my
on the other
gosh.
side of the country, and they have never officially found her person, but
Oh,
I have some ideas that it was when the people that were the hillside stranglers had first gotten to
ew.
California. There was two of them,
Mhm.
and I think she might have been. There's a possibility that she was uh, an early victim of that, because she was
Oh
strangled
my
and stabbed.
goodness. Oh my
And
goodness, that is amazing. So it's already time to take a commercial break, but when we come back, I'd love to hear like what exactly you found that experience to be.
okay,
Like what that experience was about and what happened in that moment. As you kind of reviewed and looked at that, because
gladly.
yeah, I'm sure there's lots of people out there who have experiences that are similar. I mean, you don't have to be, well, like you said, everybody's intuitive.
Anybody's got
And
and it just happens to be, are you open when something happens? And
right.
that's one of
And
my
are you aware? Like,
mhm,
do you draw your awareness to it? I
right,
would say also. Well,
right.
great. Thank you so much. We have to go to a brief commercial break. So you're watching Talks with Tracy. We will be right back to pick up with Heather Rowan Robbins right where we've left off. Thanks for watching.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back to Talks with Tracy, coming to you live on the Bold Brave Television Network. I have the pleasure today of visiting with the beautiful and amazing Heather Rowan Robbins. So, Heather, you were just talking at the end of our last segment. You were talking about an experience you had where you intuitively felt that something that murder actually had happened to your friend. So, can you share more about that? Because I think a lot of times we do have intuitive experiences that maybe we don't draw our attention to, or we don't really acknowledge or
And I think
move
in this
into.
case, I had no idea what it was. It took them a few weeks to identify her body.
Oh
Uh,
wow,
and
how
so I didn't
awful.
know for a week and a half that what had happened and when it had happened. And then I traced it down to that moment when I got her death certificate and a few other things.
Oh.
And it was, it was a place, though. I think a lot of people, I think intuition, if you look at animals, all animals are highly intuitive, but they intuit. It's a survival skill. It's like, where is the danger coming from? Where is the problem? And to develop, where is the food? Where is the person who loves me? Where are the positive things? Takes a little bit more effort. We have to choose to tune it in. And I think a lot of people block early on because their first intuition is mommy's sad or grandmom's dying. And it's like, oh, I don't want this. And they start blocking rather than trying to tune into who likes me, who's happy, where's the treat, where's the possibility, that we have to actively build that muscle because it's not such a survival skill. And that's where intuition training of any kind can really be helpful for people to be less afraid of it and to know how to guard themselves so they don't just get when their best friend dies, which is, but again, that was part of the reassurance that we are more than our bodies, and that we have work to do here on earth. That was something that I didn't know. I knew that, my body kept trying to die when I was a kid, and I left me not particular, and I had all these experiences. Another experience that let me know, that brought up a question. I was about 9 in my intuition. I was running around a bush, and all of a sudden my eyes closed, and I go, why are my eyes closing? And then whack, I ran into a stick, and I might have poked my eyes out if I hadn't closed them before I turned around the corner of that bush. How did and I was like, why? What did my body know that I did not know? And I thought a lot about our intuition. Sometimes we happen to go to the store just when a good friend happens to be at the store. Why do we go just then? Something, our feet just start walking that direction. And that our bodies often get messages that the rest of us takes a while to acknowledge. So I think of using our intuition that way, of just bringing that information into the front porch. Usually when people say, my intuition's all wrong, it told me the wrong thing, it isn't that their intuition told them something. They got a hit, and then they just had a story about that hit, and the story was wrong. So to go back to the original experience, like, I think of seeing someone at the store and they're not talking to you today, and your intuition is, they're not talking to me. Are they mad at what I said the other day? How dare they be? And then you call them up saying, hi, you didn't say hello at the store. And he goes, oh, I didn't see you. I had a terrible stomach ache. So your intuition and your perception that they were not talking to you was right. Your story about it can be wrong. And I think that's so true with all of our intuitive hits, that we have to go like, well, I don't know why, but I felt something on my left side. Let me just think about that. Let me just sit with that. And then keep my eyes over where that might be that might work. So I mentioned that I got pretty depressed as a kid because I was not healthy, and because I was, I felt sadness around me and in the world, and it was just a heavy time. And I kept thinking about backing out of this life, the suicidalness which is not uncommon in young teenagers. And was really quite suicidal, but I wasn't ready. I knew I didn't have the philosophical underpinnings, like, but why does the grass work so hard to live? Why do animals work so hard? What do they know that I don't know? And I was a question. And then I started having past life flashbacks. And that one of the, it came in various different forms, in dreams or in waking visions, but it came pretty clear to me I had been through things before, and that I had killed myself in another lifetime in a way that impacted my lungs, like I had stabbed myself, and that I had been once killed by an impact to the chest because I was such a jerk that lifetime. I deserved it. But it was that I I had a lot of karma connected to my lungs, and that
Mm,
suicide hadn't helped me any last time. It just means
mm,
doing the work another lifetime, only this time with health problems to match how I did it myself in. So I
mm,
got really depressed then that the only way out of this life was through it. But once
mm,
I turned around and decided to not stand by the back door, but really like, okay, I'm going to live this life and I'm going to get the most out of
mm.
it, it began to feed me. And I began to see the beauty. And it began to see the joy and the warmth that I had been missing when I was looking out the back door all the time. So
Right.
by the time
So
I
I have
was
a
15, I turned
question.
around. Yes,
I have a question real quick. So when you were in this process and you were seeing these past lives coming in through dreams and
and visions.
really
Mhm.
visions and memories, really, did you have an understanding that that's what that was, or how did you make sense of that? Because again, we're trying to figure out like how do you make sense of these things and draw your awareness to it so that it can be
I
useful to
read
you.
the book Siddhartha by Herman Hesse, who it's a novel that follows someone like Buddha and through lifetimes, and just brought in the idea of other lives. And I had been sort of fascinated by near death experiences, or only didn't have a name for it then, or because of my own experience. And,
Mhm.
to the possibilities. At 11, I had done my first astrological calendar, so I was already mapping the astrological months.
Oh wow.
And I was, so, it's a lot of download of information as if I was remembering it from another life. The first
Mm,
tarot deck I saw, the first, oh, like that looked so familiar, but I didn't understand it, but it looked familiar. There
mm,
were just downloads of stuff coming through in my, 13, 14, 15, and not enough concrete, like I know how to handle life. I know how to cook a dinner. I know how to, drive a car. I had to work on that, getting grounded. And that was so important. You need to be as grounded as you are open to your intuition in order to use it.
mm,
So that was where I had to work. I found I had two children fairly young in my early 20s, and one of them was special needs, or both of them in
mm.
their own way. And I call it 4 years of diaper therapy. I got grounded. They got me grounded. They got like, you got to do this every day, all day long. But then I became safer to use my intuition after that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you were saying too about um, how you said that you became depressed as a teenager because you were experiencing the sadness in the world, a lot of the sadness in the world. And that's really interesting to me because I actually have a teenager who gets frequently gets overwhelmed by just like what you said, the sadness in the world. It's like she absorbs it and feels it so intensely. And I do believe that that's part of what has caused depression for her as well. And so she's
Exactly.
kind of in this process. And it sounds like you were able to notice, even as a teenager, the things that you were drawn to.
Mhm.
Sometimes we're compelled to move in a direction, but we don't follow it. Like it's
Right.
unknown to us, so we don't really know about that. I used to be that way all the time. I would have a lot of intuitive stuff going on, but I would block it. I would shut it off and be like, oh, I don't want anybody to think I'm weird or something like that. And I
I knew they
wouldn't.
thought I was weird. That would help. But
Yeah,
but yes,
maybe
it
I.
is. It's hard to talk about because unless you've got somebody around you who has any idea, they just look at you like you're weird when you talk about it. I agree.
Right, right. So, just helping. like fostering that, like let's see, helping a young person draw attention to that and being able to say, that's okay, that's a gift, let's figure out how to work with that to protect yourself a little bit and take care of
Mhm.
yourself within
And
it,
how to use your intuition to tune in to the joy of the world, not just the
oh,
sadness. Like you can be that
nice.
sensitive. The joy is quieter, but the joy of a flower or a bee sitting on that flower
Okay.
is huge, but it's so subtle compared to the pain in the world and on the headlines that we have to go look
Oh,
for it. You
I
have to
love
go look
that.
for it.
That would be just a very useful thing to, first off, myself
Hmm.
concentrate on, but then lead by example with my kids and their sensitivities to draw attention to the joy of life rather than getting kind of consumed in the sadness and suffering. So I know you have a lot of incredible adult life experiences, and we're going to get into that in our next segment. It's already time to take a commercial break, so we are going to cut to a quick break and come back and pick up with some of your adult experiences, which are
Okay.
also amazing. So you're watching Talks with Tracy on Bold Brave Television. We will be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back to Talks with Tracy, coming to you live on Bold Brave Television Network. So we were talking about, in our youth, developing our psychic abilities and whatnot, and how we can. I was actually talking about how to support our kids in this, but Heather, you over the break, we can talk during the break, and we were talking about like kind of growing our psychic limbs. Can you just briefly?
I was saying that I think in that adolescent phase when our bodies are, shooting out and our arms are suddenly long and our legs are suddenly long, and that awkwardness because we don't know, and our chest is changing and all, that our bodies are going through so much and we don't know how to use it yet because it's new. And you see that, teenage boys knocking things over because just last week they were an inch shorter, and that our psyches are doing the same thing at that time. They're growing out of proportion, and they're picking up on things, and they're awkward, and they don't know how to use itself. And that as we begin to get a little older, we get a little bit more, we kind of, okay, my limbs do this, now I can use it more. And to you, just like athletics can help teenagers or dance get in control of their bodies and learn how to use it as it's changing, so can using our intuition to tune into the beauty of the natural world, or to tune in. That's where I think sometimes church or spiritual groups or a walk in the woods or traditional dances, you're in a bath of people that care and are they're just connecting on an intuitive level,
Mm-hmm.
whether they know it or not. And that bath of comfort, that's where hanging out with your friends can feel like, okay, I'm in a bath of people who understand me. And it can feel so
Mm-hmm.
important during those early adolescent years.
Okay, thank
I
you for
think,
that.
yeah, understanding what we're picking up, and we were talking about that. My next story is how I
Yes.
got to New York right before 9/11.
Oh, okay, yes, please.
And so this is many years later. I'm working in New Mexico, and that, long life, but I'm living in Santa Fe. I still write an article for the Santa Fe New Mexican newspaper every week, and I've been living there for 14 years. And was getting married again. Was lovely, and I'm in love. And but there's a hiring freeze in that area. So we had on my mate is a professor, teaches science and science education, and we're here because Ren is teaching at the tribal college and
Mm.
loves it. And so the process of when we were there, and it just I we had put out many applications at a time, and we got, as soon as we all that winter before the wedding, which was this weekend is my anniversary, 23rd.
Oh,
But
anniversary.
all the weekend before that, I was having that winter, the phone would ring in my dreams, like all different dreams, but the phone would ring, and I'd hear this deep female voice saying, "I'm sending you back to the front lines." I go, what the heck does that mean? Sending me back to the front lines. It's happened at least 6 times. And I'm in New Mexico, and it's beautiful, and I'm not leaving New Mexico, and I'm getting married, and all looks God lovely. And 3 days after the wedding, my mate was the only job that came through was in New York.
Mm.
I went, I guess that's the front lines. I'm going back to the front lines.
Mm.
Okay, I can either ask my mate, that fits some of the transits that I didn't understand, which was tough choices coming. I go, what tough choices? Everything looks good. I'm like, oh, I have to either ask my mate to let go of the dream job, to let
Mm-hmm.
go of my mate, or let go of my community.
Mm.
So I figured that the universe had said, you need to do this next. I'm sending you back to the front lines. Just listen. So we moved to New York in August of 2001.
Mm.
I had come back to New Mexico to close up shop that first week and on 9/11, when the Twin Towers were hit. Ren
Mm.
called me between the towers, and then we didn't have any contact for a while
Mm.
because the towers were the phone issues. But I knew that Ren was not dead. Uh, I got in on because I already had the ticket, and one of the first planes coming in, like the second day they were flying in, the place was empty. The
Mm.
pilots were saying to came on and said, I want you all to look at each other and say, if anybody tries anything, we'll take them down.
Mm.
And we all felt better when he said that. And we all looked at each other and went, yep, not happening on our watch. But the plane was half empty or 3/4 empty. But arriving in New York, going through what it went through as a wide open intuitive I was back at the front lines. I was on the front lines there, and it was really hard to smell burning bodies for 6 months, just to
Mm.
have that pain that was in there. And but one of my mentors at the time, I responded to this by choosing to go back to go to an interfaith seminary. And why I put spiritual counseling is I am an ordained interfaith minister. I had several years
Okay.
training there. And so I can say that I do spiritual counseling legally. But I can also do weddings and funerals, and I love helping people in their journeys. I needed more tools to help people, is what it is. I needed more tools to be helpful than astrology maps, but I wanted, how do I comfort? How do I support people in this process?
Okay.
Because everybody was dealing with it. But my mentor said, pointed that I was used to drawing from my surroundings and not from, and to do that when everybody is grieving and angry and scared was exhausting. Taking a subway
Mm-hmm.
nearly killed me. She said, and this is good for any circumstances where you're in a difficult situation. She said, run a snorkel to spirit. I go, what the hell does that mean? She goes, just imagine that you're inhaling from spirit, and you're feeling that like New York City is on granite. So you've got really strong rock, which is why the buildings can go so tall. So you can draw in from the rock beneath you and draw spirit down into your heart and exhale that out into the subway car. It's like exhaling out underwater. You don't inhale the water. And the people around you get better. And so it's a real exercise. And you exhale out underwater, and the people around you begin to calm down. You're not tuning into their tension, and it's a lot less exhausting. So I've used
Mm-hmm.
that with difficult relatives. I've used that in situations where it feels like there's a fight brooding, and I can just, instead of echoing their tension, just kind of pulling the energy in from spirit. From, I think my imagination is the sky above, but it's, spirit is everywhere. And then from the strength of the earth beneath me, and exhaling that into the room. And it really can help calm the circumstance, and it helped me survive living in New York right after 9/11.
Yes, absolutely. I can't even imagine the energy and the emotion that was happening around that time, and so many lives lost all at once. I
Yeah,
just can't even imagine that. So that's,
it was
I
huge.
love the way you say how you managed to protect yourself within that situation while still serving others, right? You were still
Right.
um, generating that energy of comfort to the masses. Is that correct?
I was working on it, and it was survival both for me, and it offered what I could. There are only a few people, I don't know the city. How do I help? I had one client
Okay.
who was an EMT that I had known for years, and she was an EMT that was down at ground zero. She helped stabilize the one person they got out of there. She helped with the search and rescue dogs, and took care of them while they were searching. And the only thing I could do to help what was going on down there was to give her a place every night to unload what body parts she'd found, what she'd been through that day, what she'd seen, because she had no one else to tell the story to. So I would just let her talk every night so she could go back out there. And I imagined it all going into the ground. That
Okay.
when you're dealing with somebody else's pain, you can't take it and hold it, but
Mm-hmm.
you can listen for God, you can listen for spirit. And I think of the Sufi heart with wings, like I could that one friend of mine who was an emergency room counselor, the therapist on handling what comes in the door. She said, you just sit there, you can, like, I can't help them, but I can listen for spirit, and spirit can help them, and I can listen with all my heart, but you can feel it go through you rather than sit on you,
Mm-hmm.
and just love them for that. And that was the only thing that I could do there, was to help this one person who was down there helping people in the trenches.
Oh my goodness, that's I love that description that you just gave of how you helped with that, because it makes me think of work that I've done for years. I did work in the emergency rooms of hospitals for many years as a
Wow.
consultant for suicidality and whatnot. And
Bless you for
there
that.
was, thank you. There was a lot of time when I would actually wonder to myself, like, how can I go in there and hear such pain and then like go home and just be with my family and not think about it, which I could do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was
Mm-hmm.
thankful because there's no way you can sustain work like that if you can't
If you don't,
walk away from
yeah.
it and then not think about it anymore. But what you just described is really meaningful to me because it puts words to the process that I've done for years with that. And, it helps me to have, again, greater understanding for myself. And because a lot of times people would say, oh my gosh, how can you hear these horrible stories of trauma? I'm a trauma therapist. There's so much trauma in our world. How can you hear those
So
stories
much.
day in and day out and not take them home with you or be affected by them? And I'd be like, I don't know, I just can. But what you just
Mhm.
described really is,
Yeah, you
and I
put it
always
on the
said,
altar. That's all you can do. You do
exactly.
there.
And then when people would say, how do you do a suicide consult? And there's all this literature about it, things like that. I would just say, my job when I go in there is to instill just a nugget of hope to get a person to the next day. And then I check on them the next day and I help them instill another nugget of hope. But really, what it was all about was connecting, like human connection and love and caring. That was the key for me to a good suicide consult. And that's what I had to offer. And I don't do that anymore, but I did it for years and years. So thank you for that. You really
It's
helped me to
beautiful.
understand
It's
myself and the
beautiful.
work that I do too.
And
So
I have a
it's
story
time.
that'll, after the break, I have a story that will back that up. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. So we do need to take another commercial break. And when we return, Heather, I'd love for you to share that story with us. So you're watching Talks with Tracy on Bold Brave Television Network. Please join us after the break.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back to Talks with Tracy. Coming to you live on Bold Brave Television Network. Heather, we left off. You were going to give an example of what we were talking about in the last segment, and I don't want to
And
waste any time.
that
So
this
please jump
one
in.
of my the people that worked that ran my interfaith seminary was working as a chaplain, and he was both a rabbi and a minister, and he was down in the trenches with his chaplain hat on while they were digging, while the construction workers were digging. And the construction workers did not have any trauma training. They weren't first responders. So they were, it was really hard on them. And one day, the lunch bell rang, and the construction work a guy got out of one of those big shovels, and started crying, and Rabbi walked over with a handkerchief and just handed it to him, and he looked at him and he just told him this story, and he kind of just nodded, and he listened for spirit, and he handed him another Kleenex, and he listened, and he let him tell the whole thing about it. And then um and he didn't say a word. He just listened and listened. And then the bell rang, and he had said, "I have to go back to work." And Rabbi nodded. um 2 weeks later, he saw the guy in the church that we're using as the kind of center base for the retrieval work. And the guy came over and said, "Rabbi, what you said made such a difference. Thank you so much." And he hadn't said a word, but he had listened with a big heart. And that,
Mhm.
like, when we listen, and again, we're listening for spirit, we're being, the hands and spirit of in ears of God there, as to the best of our ability. It made such a difference. And I mentioned to you that sometimes you're talking about how hard it is to not take things home. That I've
Mhm.
had some clients that really have trouble with this, whether it's because they're in the healing fields or because they just got a lot of stress at work, that they build a little altar inside their door or right outside their door. And that, when they take a little while before they come home, sometimes you have to drive around a bit, but then when they come home, to put their briefcase and their tools on the altar, and to imagine putting all the people they're worried about on the altar. And if they need to light a candle or a flame or say a prayer, just like, I'm handing these over to you, to spirit.
Mm.
And now I can go be with my family, and I can recharge, and I can be there for them, because this isn't all sitting with me not knowing what to do with it. And if I need to, I'll pick it up tomorrow on the way to work. But can I do
Mm.
anything about it over dinner? No. So how do I really put it in good hands, like symbolically but powerfully, and then go have a life so I can renew
Wow.
and come back to work? So I'd
And so
suggest
you
that for
can go and
anybody in a high
connect
stress.
in a
Mm-hmm.
meaningful way with those that you love, because so many times you can come home from work and your head can still be in your job.
Spinning.
And
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, establishing an altar, doing some kind of symbolic, something like that as you come into your home at the end of the day, I think that would be great for anybody in any profession, or even our kids who are in school with all the pressures of school and peer relationships and pressures for grades and things like that. Like, we could even teach our kids to do something
Mm-hmm.
like that, and kind of like handing it over to God, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, and then going into your safe place and relaxing and in a meaningful way. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's amazing.
Wonderful. I um,
Yes.
and sometimes you talk about how we all get signals from other places.
Hmm.
Ren and I we went from New York to Minnesota, where Ren worked at the Science Museum, but really wanted to get farther west, and we had fallen in love with Montana, where Ren had grown up. So it um but I wasn't sure, and I had my business, it was going well in
Hmm.
uh in Minnesota and St. Paul. Um, but I was in New York teaching while Ren came out here for a sudden job interview at the Salish Kootenai Tribal College. And Ren called and said, "They gave me the job, but I have to be there in 2 weeks. What do you think? Say." And I was heading to a spiritualist, uh, church ceremony and a church, whatever. And they do a seance afterwards at the spiritualist church in New York. So I went for that. I said, "I'll tell you, like, give me 12 hours. And I'll get back to you." And because this was a big change in our life. And I was there, and the psychic goes to each person in the room, or most people in the room, and says, "I have a message for you. Can I come to you?" I said, "Yes, yes, please come to me." She goes, "I have a message for you. It doesn't make sense to me, but it might make sense to you. The spirits say Just go for it. Just go for it. They said you'd know what that meant. So,
Oh, beautiful.
so
I
I,
love
I
it.
went, okay, let go of all my, we're moving to New York. You go ahead. I mean, to Minnesota,
Montana.
Montana, the third one. You go ahead. I'll be with you as soon as I can. And so then
Oh,
moved ahead, and
beautiful.
then I worked on getting the house sold and ready, and we would visit. But it
Great.
took
And
6 months.
here you are. I'm
And here
so
I am,
glad
and I
you're
love
here.
it. And I'm so
Can
glad
you
I just
please?
went for it. Hmm.
Yes, great. So, can you please tell people how they would get a hold of you? We're almost to
Yes.
the end of our show.
Okay. This is the book I'm coming out in June 11th. It's a basic
Yay.
book on how to use astrology and how to use it in a good way. I have also the Star Codes Oracle cards, which you can
Okay.
choose one card at a time. And for instance, they're just beautiful cards. I worked with a
Oh,
really lovely
nice.
artist on them. And that you don't need to know a thing about astrology. The little book tells you use them as oracle cards. And you also learn astrological terms while you use it, but I hope it is helpful just in and of itself. You can reach me at my middle name and my last name.com, rowanrobbins.com, or Google Star Codes and find me.
Beautiful. Thank you. And in 2 weeks, I'm going to have you back on so that you can talk about exactly what you're talking about there, astrology and your spiritual guidance and all of those beautiful things that you do. And that'll
Thank
be
you.
in 2 weeks. I'm actually not here next week. There's going to be a rerun because I'm going to my daughter's state rodeo finals. So I
Woo!
will be out of commission for a while, but I will be back in 2 weeks with Heather Rowan Robbins. Thank you so much for being here today, Heather.
Thank
I
you.
love talking to you, and I look forward
And you
to
too.
seeing you again in 2 weeks. So
It's a real
this
pleasure.
has been,
Thank you.
thank you. Yes, this has been Talks with Tracy, coming to you live on Bold Brave Television Network. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Wonderful.
This has been Talks with Tracy. Join us each week as Tracy and her guests will come together and realize that underneath it all, we are all the same and never alone. So join us each week and let Talks with Tracy be your safe place to land in your healing journey. Right here, Thursdays, 11 a.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.